White text over video of past events. Logo, Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. Professional Development Series presents Forging Alliances, the creation of access and advisory committees. A large room with black painted walls. In front of one wall is a long table where 4 people sit. A seated audience faces them. To the right of the table is a screen with projected slides and captions. To the left of the table, a man sits. He addresses the audience.
My name is Evan Hatfield. I'm the Director of Audience Experience here at Steppenwolf Theater Company, also an exceedingly proud member of the Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium, which for the rest of the afternoon we'll just be saying CCAC. That's mostly for Kathy, our captioner over there. Just to give you a quick breakdown on how things are going to go today, we're going to spend about 45 minutes talking with our panelists here about how they pull off communication around accessibility at their respective organizations. Some of the folks will be speaking in present tense. Some people will be speaking about past tense, about experiences that they've had. Something that I'd really like to point out as we go through the day, even though we're sitting up here in front of a table in front of you, like we're very important and know what we're doing, we have some experience here, but really we're all very close to the starting line still with our respective programs. Everyone has various lengths of time in on access, which is to say, 1, thanks for trusting us, and 2, don't feel like you're very far behind. I think that's one of the beauties of accessibility in Chicago right now, is that we're all in a position where we're starting off, and we are in such a great position to be learning from each other. I think I speak on behalf of the group too in saying, next year at this time, it would be fantastic if some of these seats were traded and some of you were up here explaining some of the things that you've learned. The second 45 minutes of the workshop, we're going to break into groups of 5 or 6, and we're going to kind of walk you through self-assessment of your organization, wherever you are, and try to help you identify some points that might help you in the creation or further implementation of an access committee. We tried this out a couple of sessions ago and had fantastic luck. We saw some really rich conversation generate and some good networking occur with people being able to talk to peers about what is it that you guys are doing. And just as importantly, it's really hard, right? Lots of amen, sisters. We always like to qualify at the top of these things that this is a safe place. Talking about accessibility can be a delicate subject sometimes, right? And I think especially when people are first starting out, people can be prevented from asking questions because they're nervous about using the wrong terminology or saying that they want to get a deaf person or something. That's an introduction to my dry sense of humor, guys. Just to qualify it, this is a safe place. You can talk about mistakes that you've made. You can use the wrong terminology. We strongly encourage you to learn and do your best with the terminology, but don't feel daunted, please. We're all learning. We all want to help each other out. Any other rules of engagement that I'm missing out on, guys? All right, let's party. I'd like to start off by inviting the panelists to introduce themselves. Your name, your institution, and how do you touch accessibility there? Jaclyn.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Jaclyn Peterson. I'm the manager of public programs at Lincoln Park Zoo. So I manage all of our programs for families, kids, and adults. I first became interested in bringing access to the zoo maybe about a year and a half ago. I went to a zoo with my friend in North Carolina. She uses a wheelchair, and I was just observing a lot of the struggles that she was having as she was getting around. It just gave me a different perspective of what it's like to visit a zoo or a cultural institution. I work in the education department, and so I started to think about what access and inclusion can look like within my programs, but I quickly realized that Making an education program accessible and inclusive involves a lot of different things around the zoo. So can participants get to our space? Do they need interpreters if we're doing a lecture? Just a lot of different things outside of just education. And so I started to talk with other people around the zoo about access and making sure that our spaces are accessible. We have good parking, we have all the critical information on our website, and all sorts of things that kind of got me talking to other people around the zoo, a couple of them who are sitting right here. And we've been able to get a lot done over the last year already. And so today, as we're talking about access committees, that's kind of where I'm coming from, starting from an education point of view, and then just sort of working with other people throughout the zoo as needed to get things done. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Arfa, and I'm an attorney at Equipment Gallery, which is a disability device firm. I'm also I have a hearing class, so I talk like I have an accent. If you need to repeat anything I say, please let me know. It is not hurt my feelings, and I want you to be able to understand me. You are about 18 years speech therapy for something, right? So how I got involved in this, and then I'm very passionate about accessibility to the arts. And about 3 years ago, I moved back to Chicago, and I saw that there were only a couple of theaters that were providing captioning to the theater instead of leading to me, and I really wanted to be a part of helping to encourage other cultural institutions to become more accessible, not only because I love the theater and other arts, but I also wanted other people with disabilities to be able to equally enjoy all of these cultural offerings that Chicago has to offer. So that part of how I got involved with all of this.
Hi, I'm Jason Harrington. I'm the Education Outreach Manager at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. There I manage all of the programs for students in addition to managing the access programs for the patrons that come to the theater. At the beginning of, not this season, but last season, the theater had a renewed interest in making the access programs more robust and solidifying what was already in place. And they reached out to me to take the reins on that, and having really no experience working in accessibility, I said yes. But over the course of a season and a half, we've certainly learned a lot, and I absolutely have learned a lot working with patrons and just managing these programs to make them as great as they can be.
We have 3 mics and we're passing one. My name is Lynn Walsh. I'm the co-chair, one of the co-chairs of CCAC, and I'm the former manager of guest access and inclusion at Chicago Children's Museum. So I'll be one of those people speaking about past experience, but we thought it would be really helpful because we were one of those organizations that had a cross-departmental team within the museum, and we all started off at the very bottom and slowly we're working our way up. So hopefully my past experience will be helpful.
I hope so too. I just want to speak a little bit more about Rachel's presence on the panel this afternoon. 3 of the 4 folks here are going to be speaking to their experience, primarily working within their organizations interdepartmentally. Rachel does not work for an arts organization. She works for the organization that comes at you if you're not providing accessible services. And that is kind of a threat, folks, just so you know. Good cutback. Steppenwolf was really lucky to work with Rachel last year around a production of a play called Tribes, which, if you're not familiar, focuses predominantly on deaf themes and work with a deaf actor, which meant that the navigation of that particular play, especially within the deaf community, was something that was very important to us. And so we were really lucky to have Rachel lead and chair the Tribes Outreach Committee, which was a group of 6, 7 deaf, hard of hearing individuals that we worked with extremely closely for about 4 months to be able to pull off that production correctly. And so it's a huge topic, the notion of working with an advisory committee that's external, an accessible committee that's internal. But we're going to try to do our best today to tie those together for you. The commonalities that I see that we talked about are that both involve the utilization of people within your community that are really good at what they do and have expertise, all to the furthering the goal of making your institution more accessible. Before we dive on in with the questions for the panelists, I would like to introduce one more person, Risa, if you want to pop on up, and she's going to introduce a new segment that we're trying to pull off at these workshops.
Hi, I don't want to block anyone, but I want to make sure you can see me. Thanks, Evan. So we're studying something new. It's called Uncommon Accommodation. And it's going to be a little couple-minute segment at the beginning or end, depending upon the session, about something that we wanted to bring to you that might be a little bit relevant to the overall program, or something that we haven't been able to talk to you about in past programs. And now we're delving deeper and deeper into certain criteria, like you'll hear today. But in the beginning, we were doing specific programs on different disabilities, and we haven't been able to cover all disabilities, obviously, because there are so many. But we wanted to bring some of those that we didn't cover to you in little segments that are going to be continuing on throughout our program. So this first one that we're doing, I'm really excited to do it here because one of the, it didn't really tie in to have it directly relate to the panelists, but since we were at Steppenwolf, I wanted to present something that Steppenwolf can talk about. Because like you said, we want to keep it real and we're all doing this together, and it's an evolving process. And I wanted to show you that, Steppenwolf, has similar problems and issues and uncommon accommodation. So Evan's going to be presenting on one of those situations, and it's just kind of, to share an experience and how creativity can really make different accommodation come together.
Thanks. Creativity and luck and colleagues that can surprise you. By way of introduction, I've been at Steppenwolf for about 9 years now. I started off in our marketing department. I house managed for about 5 years, was just responsible for physical amenities for patrons. Over the course of that time, it was pretty apparent that there was a huge community that we weren't serving. We would do our one sign language interpreted performance. No one came. We would do our one audio described performance. 2 people came. It became a vicious cycle where we would not put resources into doing outreach around that programming because no one was coming. But you see what happens there? And so it was just time that we needed to do something about it. The first play that we started to do dedicated outreach to increase our services for the deaf community around sign language. We were working with an outside contractor who coordinated our interpreters for us. And we're going through the process and all is well. And then someone points out, oh, and by the way, one of your interpreters uses a wheelchair, which isn't the end of the world, not a bad thing at all, except for the fact our hokey building, which was constructed back in 1990, while legal, not necessarily friendly. And one of the ways it's not friendly is that our stage, where we do earth-shattering art, it's not wheelchair accessible. That's kind of embarrassing. Thing is, we've got this interpreter who wants to just ply their trade, and we're in the position of now telling them, sorry, sucker. So keep in mind, this is the first time we're trying to do something more than just the previous offerings. So very sheepish, very hat in hand, wanting to make it happen, I go to our production department. Who here is from a theater? 5. The equivalent for galleries or museums would be, do you guys know, like, who builds stuff? Like, who's the blue collar, like, yeah, we use tools. The exhibit department? So facilities. So the equivalent of going to your exhibit or facilities department and then explain the problem. And I was expecting to fight and to lose, honestly, and then go back with bad news. Shock and awe. in the most pleasant way possible when our carpenters came back and said, oh, no problem, we'll just build a platform. It was for one show, but they dropped a couple hours and about $50 of materials to pull this off. And it required communicating with the interpreter. All right, so this isn't going to be a conventional entrance. We are going to have to go around the back alley, through the freight elevator. We have to identify a path that we have to practice in advance. But with some communication and some reach out, I was totally pleasantly surprised to find that other departments were willing to help us out. And if that's not an amazing segue point to asking panelists about how their organizations have helped out as well, I don't know what it is. Question time. Jaclyn first, what's the basic structure of your access committee?
I would consider our access committee to be a little bit half-baked. We have started it, but we don't really feel that it's complete at this point, which we're happy with because we've already made some progress, but we just have some development to do. So the folks who have joined our access committee are people who just have been the people necessary for getting a few specific jobs done. And we may talk about this throughout this talk, but for us, really, we had a couple tasks that we wanted to get done. And so we pulled the people who just could get those tasks done. And I feel like we sort of just formed out of that. So I'm from the education department, and originally we had another person, our director of education was coming to these meetings as well. We have our senior guest experience director and our director of training, who are also part of our access committee. We have our director of volunteer services. Now and then our VP of HR attends. But right now we really are just kind of pulling people together as needed based on each project. What we'd like to do is continue to diversify the types of people who are part of our committee. So, identify other projects we want to work on and then figure out who should be part of it.
Lynn, can you talk about the representatives Play for All?
Sure. So when we first started at the museum, an email or something went out about 12, 13 years ago that said, if you're interested in accessibility or disability awareness or whatever they called it at the time, come to this meeting. Well, about 30 people showed up, which was really exciting that we had so much interest from the museum, and we decided it was going to be a team and everybody was really excited. But as that first year went on, nothing ended up happening. There was really too many people, no one took the lead, so the first year was basically a wash. Going into the second year, one of the vice presidents asked two of us that still kept coming to her with questions throughout the year and kept showing interest if we wanted to kind of handle access and inclusion at the museum. There was no budget, no money, and just the two of us that had no background or experience at all, but we had the passion. And I'll probably say passion 100 times during the course of today, because that was what was really important to us at the museum. And that's what helped us get as far as we got. So for the first, once the two of us got together and we accepted that mission, we still had our full-time jobs, and that was just an added something. We did the same thing as what the zoo did. We called upon people at the museum as needed. So not only were we getting what we wanted, maybe a little bit money from development or maybe something from exhibits, but we were also kind of testing the people we went to, and as time went on, if people proved themselves to us, they were invited to be part of the team. It just kind of happened that way. If we kept going to the same person and they were really excited and had that passion, let's ask them if they want to be involved in this. So we didn't have motives, I guess, from the beginning, but that's just how our team slowly grew. And then I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, we got to the point where we had someone from every department within the museum on our cross-departmental team, and it got big enough where we had a core team, 4 or 5 of us that met on a regular basis and did the job almost daily. And then we had an extended team that met on a monthly basis. They'd report back what was going on in their departments and if they had questions, and that's how things ran until about the end of May when there were some changes at the museum.
Thanks. Jason, what does it look like on the other end of the pier?
We don't have any anything that we formally call an access committee, I think of it more like you guys alluded to. I have kind of partners in other departments that we work on specific pieces of the programs on together. The director of ticketing is probably my closest advocate and partner, where he'll take the lead on questions about accessible seating or ticketing, purchasing tickets, and anything programmatic comes to me. Some of those partnerships were out of necessity, and some I think of as being more strategic. Our director of production has a huge role in the creation of our touch tours and leading our touch tours, and something it absolutely could not happen without his support and without his buy-in. On the other side, all of the program that we do takes some sort of a footprint in the theater itself and during our performance. So communicating with actors and kind of having their support has been really important. So one thing I always do is loop in stage management. And if it's one of our resident stage managers, it's a briefer conversation. If it's a newer stage manager, it's lengthier. But reaching out to them, talking through the programs, and then we always have a couple of actors join us for touch tours, so employing them to kind of help choose who those people are going to be, because we're choosing not only the character, but also the actor who plays that character. And some actors, I would say, regardless of how awesome their performance is, are better or worse suited for that kind of interaction with patrons. Something I could probably figure out, but looping in and having that kind of collaboration with stage managers and with others, I think helps a lot with buy-in. They feel like an active member in these decisions, and so that the programs don't feel like something that's kind of another thing that's being put upon them, but something that they're an active member in, has been really, really helpful. So kind of these series of relationships and partnerships with other folks in different departments.
So some of these relationships that you all describe, I mean, some of them are extremely functional, right? I mean, where you need the guy to turn the lights on to participate. But then, do you find yourselves having symbolic relationships as well, where maybe the stage manager, Jason, isn't actually lifting the box, so to speak, but it's giving him that sense of buy-in, right?
Yeah, and having that buy-in is going to affect how that person communicates the programs with the actors and with the crew, and that pays off tremendously come the day of the event. And same, I mean, what Lynn was saying too, I do keep my eyes open, and people who ask questions about what we offer, or you can see kind of the spark in someone's eye, and I really try to take note of that and think, all right, Shelley's been to a bunch of our CCAC programs, Shelley's one of our guest service associates, has shown a real kind of natural interest. So I think, hey, you want to volunteer at the touch tour? And I know that interest is there, I know that passion is there for her. So keeping your eyes open, and there's a woman who works in our finance department who has a son who is blind, and I'm constantly having conversations with her about our programs and her participation, because I know that the interest is inherent, and that is really helpful as well.
And is that something that you sent like an official blast out to the organization saying, hey, any relatives with disabilities?
No, it's keeping my eyes and ears open. And even, our touch tour program is much more established than it was 2 years ago, but I still, when I'm looking for volunteers, staff volunteers to join me at the touch tour, I'm not calling people or emailing people, but I'm walking down to an office and knocking on the door and with a big smile saying, hey, guess what next Sunday is? But that kind of relationship building amongst my colleagues, like I said, really pays off.
So as far as internal access committees go, I think we have 3 representations here, right? We have the lone wolf out on the tundra, Jason, building relationships on his own. You've got the half-baked wolf. No. Now I'm hungry. We have the half-baked wolf at Lincoln Park Zoo, and then we have like the long-term structured program with 2 tiers of membership that occurred with time and maturation at the Children's Museum. Rachel, would love to hear how you went about selecting folks from the deaf and hard of hearing community to kind of serve these same functions on an advisory panel.
I really, maybe I should explain why we decided it was important to have a external committee to explain about tribes, and particularly how many people here saw tribes. Okay, so it was next to it here and stuff. Just Evan said was about a deaf man who kind of explored his identity, but there was nobody in house that really knew or had the maybe experienced advice how to properly present these in terms of remarkably to accommodations to investment. So we belong to this, so Evan and I talked about how tribes was an incredible opportunity to also bring in and introduce new people with hearing class who may have not experienced that of live theater before that was accessible. Just by the topic, the subject matter, it was naturally going to be influenced. We were raised because there were over 800 deaf and hard of hearing people who came to tribe study in 2.5 months. So that's kind of the spoiler that it was successful. So what we did in terms of the community was we wanted to be very fair in terms of bringing people who have diverse experiences. I'm not sure how much you know about the field of hearing class, but there's a huge range. There are people who are born deaf, people who lose their hearing, that age, definitely people like my mom, she told me that she going to the audiologist to get her ear checked for hearing. So there's a huge reach with my experience as somebody who was born deaf. You could be wearing hearing aids quickly if there's, you could, your communication room could be sign language, spoken language, a little bit of, not a little bit old, or clear speech, many other options. So how do we make sure that we have the represent rather than that? So we made a list first. I remember we started with people who have come to Step Up with Kapua. So people who were familiar with first Step Up with Rachel Arfa, but then we also looked at how what each person could bring. We wanted somebody that could do outreach to the signing STEM community. We wanted somebody that could reach out to the age done to those with hearing class. We tried to make sure that others' perspective would equally represented, and frankly, that really paid out because they really came time to talk about how to market and promote the guy who was an actor. We didn't know what to call him, and we had a huge discussion about that. Should we call him a big T Dan, culturally Dan? Should we call him a small D? This is just punctuation, but in the deaf community, it really matters if people are better, if they identify by one, if you're called by the very big D or little D, and so forth. So out of that feedback really helped Step Up to be authentic about how they presented and advertise trends.
And I think some of the parallels there with the Internal Access Committee is that some of the folks that we were working with on the Outreach Committee were just amazing when it came to their contribution. I mean, they were sending emails and making videos for us and really pounding the pavement. And some folks, I think their participation was more symbolic. They showed up and they participated, but then they kind of grabbed their tickets, invited their friends. All valuable though, because all those different perspectives were represented. And so one of the things we got to do is when we finally do produce a marketing material that has a lowercase d deaf descriptor used for that actor, we were completely prepared for any flack from anyone, and to be able to say, we didn't do this arbitrarily. We did this in consultation with representatives from the community. Hugely, hugely helpful. I'm curious about, to hear from everyone, how do you motivate your team? Both tangibly, in the instance of the outreach committee, we gave them free tickets and invitations to parties and such. But then there was also the challenge of getting them to buy into mission. Because if people are going to be representing us to the world, it's really important, right, that they actually know what they're representing and can speak on our behalf. And so I'm wondering, externally, internally, tangibly, how do you reward people? And this can get in the form of what's your go-to bribe. And then how do you get them to buy in? And is there a correlation to, do you incorporate your accessibility mission into your company's overall mission? And I'll start with Jaclyn.
I guess one thing that comes to mind is that the zoo is free, and so we do a lot to try to make the zoo as accessible as possible in that sense. And so I think the few people that we have on our access committee, we really take that to heart, that the zoo should be very accessible in all sorts of ways. We already obviously have the price barrier taken care of, but there are a lot of physical or service barriers that we're trying to take care of. One thing that I've been pleasantly surprised by is just that there's just a really good feeling whenever our group gets together, and we're kind of riding on the feel-good wave of we're doing things that we know are important and that matter, and that we can stand by if we're talking to our senior management or anybody else. And so far, we really are just working on very tangible projects that can get done. And I think that that's motivating because we kind of just run through our checklist at each meeting and we know that we're achieving things. So for anybody who doesn't have an access committee or maybe has something like that but isn't calling it an access committee, I would just really encourage people to start small and start with things that you can achieve and get done, because that can be really motivating. And that's also gives you something to share with other departments or again with your senior management. And I'm just the kind of person who likes to check things off a list. So that really is just what motivates me, and it's kind of just fun to get things done and work with other people. And again, collaborating and being able to bring different ideas and perspectives together. So to do it with other people as opposed to just bringing it upon yourself. I feel for you, Jason, that you're the lone wolf, so it's kind of up to you to champion this stuff, which is nice because we don't have one person who owns these efforts. It's up to us to kind of all come together and push our group as opposed to one person who holds us accountable. So pros and cons to having a committee versus I know some institutions have an access coordinator who leads those things. So yeah.
I'm gonna conclude each answer by asking, does your executive director know that you have this group that meets about accessibility?
That is a good question. At our last meeting, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, but Erica brought this to our senior staff just recently and just told them a little bit about what they're doing, and they were excited to hear about it. So just recently did they hear more about our group, so it's pretty unofficial.
So you started off kind of grassroots of your own accord,
yeah.
And then once you had some demonstrated successes and motion, you then brought it to the attention of the higher-ups.
That's how we handled it. So it's interesting hearing Lynn's example of just kind of doing a big email out there, a big call out. Because I know sometimes it can be a top-down directive of, we should do this. And that's great. But we've done it the opposite way. It's been really grassrootsy of just, we need to get this project done. Let's do it. And then I bet since we got this one done, we can do another one. Let's keep building on that. Yeah.
Jason?
Again, the idea of truly collaborating, and I never thought of myself as a lone wolf, but I like that a lot. But being kind of the coordinator of all the pieces, again, having conversations with people where their input is going to affect the program itself, and allowing for that to happen. A real concrete example, I work with a woman in marketing to come up with a marketing plan and to employ our e-blasts and our mailings and all that. And really, I'm the only person at the theater who's hard at tracking our attendance numbers. And our production of King Lear just closed. And in terms of patrons who were there to participate in our access programs, our numbers were really strong and broke some records. And I just make sure that, a week leading up to the show, I'm going to run down to her cubicle and say, Donnie, you're not going to believe it. But that kind of, I could keep that to myself and kind of pat myself on the back. But sharing those successes with those I work with, I think has been a really great motivator. And just saying, yeah, we are in this together, and the work that you did is directly paying off. Being that mirror, or being that kind of champion for the programs, I think is a huge motivator. And that happens in all different ways. We always, we don't have any formal kind of outside committee, but I do use the patrons as much as I can. After every performance where we've had programming, I'll email and ask for feedback. And if someone writes a really stellar email and response, I'm going to share that with a ton of people. Again, to share that success, but also I bet they'll be a little more excited, come the next production. So it's kind of these little steps to make people feel included and to share all the good stuff.
And does your executive director have any idea what you're doing?
The very first Touch tour, this was a big deal. The very first Touch tour we had, he came and was taking photos on his phone, and really, really cool. He definitely is aware of the programming. Certainly, probably not aware of all of how it all comes together. But he was the one kicking us in the butt to say we need to be doing more, and let's make these more robust.
Lynn Walsh.
I pretty much agree with Jason. Anytime any good feedback came my way, I shared that with anybody and everyone. And being at a children's museum, the feedback we were getting were typically from parents or caregivers, and they were these wonderful stories about these children that maybe did something or experienced something they never experienced before. Tearjerkers many times. So, of course, we shared that, and of course, that had huge, huge impact on everyone at the museum. Externally, being an organization that was not free and had a pretty hefty admission price, we were able to offer free admission or group visits to any external partners that helped us. We had really great relationships with the Rehab Institute of Chicago. They did a ton of stuff for us, and what I give them is not only a ton of free passes, but every summer we host a few of their field trips for their day camps. It really cost us nothing. We were open anyway. They brought more than enough staff with the 5 children or 10 children that they brought. So things like that felt like nothing to us, but were really huge to the organizations. And yes, because it was a cross-departmental team, and one of the members of our team was a vice president who went to the management committee meetings, and the executive director was in the management committee meeting. People were aware, everybody was aware of from bottom to top what was going on.
Rachel, to take it to the external committee, as the chair of an outreach committee, how did you motivate a group of volunteers after work on weekends to pitch in? Can you say those again, please? We just leveled the playing field.
I would say 3 weeks.
We heard it.
I'm not going to apologize for that. So I really, but not just that, but also just to put this in context, there's not, at the time, there was not as much accessible theater. At the time, there were maybe 3 theaters that were providing accessibility in the bottom 2012. Since then, I think that number is much higher. I would say 7 or 8 theaters, which is phenomenal. But at the time, historically, theaters have not been welcoming to inviting the people with disabilities to come here in class. So with this opportunity came up to be a part of what was happening at Step Room. That Step Room brought me back from people with here in class to make it a more valuable experience to me, that was what motivated me. I think everybody else came for the food and the drinks. But the other really thing happened as we had these meetings. Evan was the liaison to step up in for Peter, but he took that feedback back and he shared it with the marketing department. And we had somebody from the marketing department in one of our meetings. We had questions from other departments on what to do, and they took that feedback seriously. And I can't tell you how important that is. A lot of times people ask for feedback. If you were going to do that, why did you even ask for the feedback? So I was stepping from to it was really great. I'm not saying that that means you have to accept everything they said, not by any means, but it was really incorporated into all aspects of the show. And then the other great thing too was that we cleared the party. We had a special VIP night to the Deaf and Hard of Hearing community. So for one night we had 100 people from all across the Deaf and Hard of Hearing community, and we grew up and I said about how the deaf community is very specific. There are people who sign, there are people who talk. You can imagine there's a lot of political factions there. But one night we brought people together to celebrate theater and to celebrate a show, and we invited our community to be a part of that, to help them. And it find that in that really, and I think the people were proud to be there, to be the welcome people there from the community to step around for the show. So I think that was a pretty big way to do it.
Hello, which comes back to free drinks. So I don't have a ton of power within the organization, but I work for enough house, and I have access to a bar, and I have access to tickets, and so I take full advantage of that. What tools do I have within my command that I can help thank people and motivate them? And so for the Tribe's Outreach Committee, you know, each person on that committee got 6 tickets to do whatever they wanted with over the course of the run. Use them for yourself, use them for your friends, family, and hey, here's some drink vouchers. And hey, invite some people to the party. And that put each of those committee members into the position of they've got some responsibility and power here, and they can invite you to a pool party. And they took full advantage of it. It was fantastic to watch. And that made them feel like they were buying in and they were being valued. But it also let them be that person who got to invite the world to this cool party. It was really hard because we did such a good job of bringing a diverse group out, but that meant that there were 7 people that we had to address the concerns of, none of them agreeing. And since we were trying to do justice by that, it was tricky for me in the middle of trying to explain to the group, some members, why we can't do ASL interpretation for all 74 performances, and why we can't fly the interpreters in from the rigging above the stage. But then I had to go and explain to our marketing department, while they thought that those hand signs that spelled family on our marketing materials were super sexy and innovative, every single deaf person looking at that material knew that they were being thrown a bone, and we've got to go back to square one and redesign that sucker. So tons of battle picking, tons of learning who do you actually listen to. And when it comes to working with outside advocates, sometimes it's the person that's the most vocal that comes to your attention first that makes you think, I want to listen to you, because you're talking really loud and you're the only blind person I know. But then you start to talk to other blind people maybe, and you find out that they have a completely different perspective there. And so I started to think, all right, so I'm 6'5", and maybe I'm the only tall person you know. And maybe you hang out with me for a little while, and then you go out in the world and you see other tall people, and you just assume they all love unicorns too. not the case. So really, as you're going out and trying to bring in your people and build your committees and such, don't just take that one advocate. Build yourself a group and get a really varied perspective and take them all seriously. That's my one tip that I want to share. At this point, we're getting close to wanting to break into sessions, but I would like to go down the line, please. And the way we framed it to these guys is you're on a train and you're pulling away from the station. And one of these folks here is running alongside the train. And you're picking up speed, and you only have time to yell out one tip for starting an advisory committee at your organization. What is that one tip?
I love it. I'm just going to reiterate what I already said, to start small and start with things that you're excited about and you know that you can easily get partners and other departments to work with you on it. So it helps to build your own confidence, the confidence of the group, and then it gives you something to show off to whoever you need to show that off to. So I've been really encouraged by the work that we've been doing, and it's been just like updating the website or making sure our service animal policy is in writing, things that are really small, but it's helping us to get excited. And so I think that that's very accessible for anybody here who doesn't have one, and that's just an easy place to start.
Rachel, External Advisory Committee, train station, one tip.
So I would say if you're at that train, you should grab us up a part of the ride. Really, if you could have worked with an external committee, it doesn't take that much. It's not there are volunteers. It's nice if you collaborate tickets. It doesn't take much if you're happy to participate, because for them in our service shows it better increase accessibility. So it's great to be able to create that opportunity to show that you're willing to increase your accessibility.
Let's change your scenario to a blimp, Jason.
Jump! Find the people you want to collaborate with, people that you think would be well suited, and then find ways for them to take ownership over the work along with you, and ownership over the work and ownership over the successes as well.
Mine's kind of two-part. It goes back to passion. If you find people that are as passionate as you are about what you believe in, so access and inclusion, say, you'll be successful. The second part is you don't have to know everything about everything to be successful in access and inclusion. Of a huge step by you being here today, you met all these other people who are interested, and all of us are here to help each other. So people that are passionate and people that are willing to assist are really what you need.
Jaclyn wants to give one more.
Sorry, but this is a good plug for CCAC. I just want to encourage everybody to lean on this community, because I've already seen even at the zoo, just that there is such a thing as the CCAC gives a credibility to this topic, and to you spending your time here and then using the CCAC as a resource. So coming to these workshops, jumping on our email listserv, and engaging with this community. Sorry, I know it's another tip, but I just wanted to give that plug, because this group has really given us a lot of motivation as an access committee.
Amen. Before we go and break into smaller groups so you can do some conversating, any burning questions at the moment for anyone on the panel? We won't take it personally, and we won't quibble. Sir? Hold on a second, I'm going to hand you over the microphone just so the assistive listening devices can pick you up.
So does CCAC position itself as an expert on accessibility for cultural institutions? No. So then, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying no, and I'm assuming all of us on the steering committee feel the same way, that we do not consider ourselves experts.
So how does a cultural institution move itself towards kind of the civilization or the integration of accessibility through all functions of the organization? And I understand that it kind of sounds like we're at the beginning of the thing, but like, where do you go for for ADA expertise? What do you do if somebody shows up at a show, without calling in advance, that sort of thing?
Okay.
I'm going to hand the microphone, which is now on, to our founder, Christina Gunther. She's going to tackle that trick.
I think that's a great question. I think CCAC, we really position ourselves as a peer organization and a professional development organization, so we're really here to help get the conversation started. But in terms of getting it started at your institution, there are a lot of different resources that are out there, and a really important one is the Great Lakes ADA Center. They offer free technical assistance regarding the ADA. I don't think any of us here consider ourselves, well, except for Rachel, who's a lawyer, but everyone else here, we're not experts in the ADA, and it's quite a complicated set of regulations, so that's a really good place to start when you have a lot of questions. But I think just posing it on the listserv that we have is another way that you can get some pretty immediate answers for those emergencies that happen. And finally, a good resource would be the Kennedy Center's Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability. It's an annual conference. Next year's conference will take place in Washington, D.C., August 3rd through the 5th, I believe. So that's a really great national and international resource to turn to.
At this point, let's start peeling off. I'm going to start with the panelists, and I'm going to ask each one to call off a number, 1 through about 28 people can do this. Christy, let's take this one home, shall we? I hope that was a productive exercise for everyone. My personal experience has been that it's pretty helpful just being able to be in a circle with people and complain about what's going on in your respective institutions. So I hope it was a good exercise like that. We're not alone here. I do apologize for the heat in the garage here. It is a garage, but what it is. Rather than us going through and synthesizing what this afternoon was all about, leaving you with that final moment, we'd like to just go through and ask everyone to share one thing that they learned today. If you need a scenario, you're on a train, right? It's pulling out of the station. If you would, just because it's nice to hear where everybody's from, when you get the mic, say your name and what institution you're from, please. And then just a short haiku, if you want to. What did you learn today? Jaclyn, a haiku? Says the person with the mouthful.
I'm not ready for talking at all. That's
all right. This is actually more for the audience. So
yeah, that's what I thought.
Rick
Kay with the Lincoln Park Zoo. The thing that I learned is that everyone has challenges, and everyone is being very creative in ways to approach them. No one has all the answers, but everyone is willing to listen to other people's scenarios and see if they can apply it to their own.
Erica Kohler with Lincoln Park Zoo. Maybe not so much learned, but got reinforced that we're not alone. That it is a safe place. It's a great place to find those resources, and we're all in this together. And sometimes that's just nice to be reminded of.
My name is Dawn Kasayan. I'm from the Milwaukee Public Museum from Milwaukee. I've been coming to these trainings for, I think, almost 2 years now, a year and a half. And one thing I learned today is that us passionate people that are in this room today, need to keep our voices going and make sure we're heard through the right people. And I also wanted to say that because of the training I've received from coming to all these events, our exhibits department reached out to me with a set of blueprints for a new exhibit and said, can you look at these and tell us your thoughts on accessibility? So thank all of you, because it was what you're doing and me just sitting in chairs listening that made that happen. So keep it up.
When you have a triumph like that at your institution, if you could just look at the person and go, you just got CCAC'd.
Yeah, I'm Mark Williams, and I'm still processing, so I don't know if I'm ready to say this one. Is that okay?
My name is Mila. I am Brazilian. I live in São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm staying here to study more for accessibility. I have a website, it's Milala, and I incentivize and motivate people to travel and contact with cultural activities. And my job is I visit places where you work and identify what accessibility is there and put in my website to motivate and incentivize people. Thank you so much to learn with you.
Hi, I'm Sophie Schrein with the Museum of Science and Industry. And one thing that was really exciting and encouraging to learn today is that we're not like super far behind. You know, that other people are also still getting started with things, and it's not like we have to play catch up. We can just start where we are at and say that that's great and go from there and just look forward.
My name is Mike. I'm with Writers Theater, and I think one great reminder that I got after hearing somebody's story earlier is really the reason why we're all doing this, and just that it's all about providing a great experience for every single person that comes to our organization. I think most of us are passionate about what we do and where we work, and I think it sometimes is very easy to get caught up in all of the details and the hard work and the stress you have to go through to do all these things, but remembering in the long run that we're providing an opportunity for people to do things that we like to do, which I think is really important to remember.
Hi, I'm Margaret. I'm from Writers as well. And Jaclyn, when you said choose small goals that are achievable, that really resonated with me. I think it's so easy for things to become daunting. And the other thing that I extrapolated from that is choose solutions that work for your organization. Thank you. That was a really nice reminder.
I'm Christine from Chicago Children's Museum. And I learned today that there's no right answer, which is why committees are so necessary, because there's an answer coming from so many directions that's so right for that person for so many reasons. And that's why we have to collaborate and discuss these things.
Hello, I'm Elise from the National Museum of Health and Medicine, Chicago. My favorite part was, again, the small goals. Just talking about how maybe we don't have funding to change the building, in every way that we'd like to, but if we can start off with something small, every little thing helps.
Good afternoon. I'm Lloyd Barber. I'm a volunteer at the Art Institute on Fridays, where I work with the docents and other readers getting students into the museum. And we're just in the process of putting together a diversity committee of how we can accommodate students with special needs. And I think, to repeat the other two people, what I learned today was since we're just beginning, is to start small and find 2 or 3 goals that you think you can accomplish in your first year, and then go from there.
I'm Emily. I'm an intern with Chicago Children's Theater. I think the biggest thing for me today was this idea of external committees, especially for us, because we're not only working with children but their parents. And so when we are working with children who have special needs, being ever mindful that it's not just about what the experience is like for them, but as well as what the experience is like for their caregivers and parents. And just keeping in mind that while we may be thinking about the needs of the child first and foremost, their parents' needs are just as important, because if they come and are overwhelmed by the situation, that's not good either. So that was a really helpful reminder.
Hi, I'm Eva. I'm the education manager at Chicago Children's Theater. And this is my first meeting, so one thing I learned is that it exists here. CCAC, not CCAC. CCAC.
That's a different organization.
That's a different meeting. That's a different thing. Yeah, I think the other thing, we work so much with access internally and on our board, but thinking of new questions and new perspectives to engage with our
patrons and really formalizing a way of feedback. So that was really helpful to think about.
I'm Mark Friedland. I'm from the Brookfield Zoo, and I think making sure to just be out there and be on the floor and talk with the guests and make sure that emailing patrons and talking with guests, really important to get that feedback, and then use those individuals that are there at your institution and build that team around your institution and even those guests that are there so that you can get that outside committee and group formed and started to help develop more accessibility.
Hi, I'm Anna Cosner. I'm the head of visitor services at the Morton Arboretum. And I think the thing that really struck me today was, again, Jaclyn's advice, just start small and start with tangible projects that people can really see and put their hands on, because that can really help get the ball rolling. And I'm just starting to get some traction on first projects for the Arboretum that'll hopefully be implemented by next spring. So that really hit home and makes me feel like I'm on the right track.
Hi, I'm Teresa from Bodies of Work, a network for disability arts and culture. And the tip that I liked most hearing today was that when you have an advisory committee, don't assume that if you have one blind person on the committee that their perspective speaks for all blind people, and the same goes for deaf and all of the other disabilities as well.
Hi, I'm Chris Nesbitt from SHED, and coming here today I've been thinking more in terms of external panels, and even though we have teams, you know, all kinds of different teams at the aquarium, it wasn't until I was sitting here thinking, oh, wait a minute, this is not a team we have, and it hadn't occurred to me that that would be sort of an easy goal for us to get people kind of all on the same page. So that was helpful to hear.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh in the microphone. My name is Lisa. I'm on the CCAC, and one thing that really resonated with me today was that to always make people feel important and on the team with you, and through that it goes places faster, I guess. So that's nice.
My name is Stephanie. I'm from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and I think the thing I learned today is kind of come down to this guy next to me, and I made a two-man team in concerns to ADA, and now I think we're thinking we could do a committee, and maybe even from there involve some GMs or trustees that this is important to. We've got one that's come forward recently, so I think there's a way to expand it.
I'm Charles. I'm also from the Chicago Symphony, and obviously we're colleagues because I think we have the same thought. And really that is, you know, as many voices as you can get into the conversation here, the better. You know, we have so many different departments in our organization, and if we can have those all represented, the better, and also, you know, reaching out to our patrons, our donors, our trustees, and getting them all in the conversation too, similar to what all of you have said, the more the merrier in the conversation.
I'm Lucas Livingston from the Art Institute of Chicago. I learned that Evan's not kidding when he says it's a garage theater. I learned about so many wonderful, cool people here, and many of the same things that you all have already been saying, baby steps and getting additional advocates involved. And I learned that the Art Institute has a docent diversity committee. So Lloyd, let's talk. And Sandy has escaped.
You know, I've been in that modern wing at the Art Institute, and it's not so hot.
Ouch! Wow.
That was way easier than trying to sum it up ourselves, right? That was fantastic, guys. I'm glad that this hit in all those different ways. To wrap it up, just want to thank all of you for coming out and trusting us today and shivering through the cold with us. I would love to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. That's all I've got. Again, everyone, thanks a million for coming out. We appreciate it. Stay warm.
Fade to black. White text on black background. Forging Alliances, the creation of access and advisory committees, presented by Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. For workshop resources and more information, visit chicagoculturalaccess.org. Presenting speakers. Moderator, Evan Hatfield. Panelists, Rachel Arfa, Jason Harrington, Jaclyn Wegner, and Lynn Walsh. Workshop Accessibility. Kathy Raycan, Real-Time Captioning. Video editing, captioning, and audio description by BridgetMelton.com. Video fades to black.